The Nerdcast Empire is on the air for the second time today. We are on the air with podcasting excellence here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio, and we are back to talk all things NXT Battleground, which has just wrapped up on Peacock, and we're going to give our thoughts on what we thought about the NXT Premium Live event, which just wrapped up at about 10:30 Eastern Time, as we have stepped into the studio to give our thoughts on an event that had 6 matches on the card, and certainly a very solid event. Be interested to see what everybody thinks about the event in total. But first, let's introduce the crew. Joining me for the second time today in the studio is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going pretty well. I'm excited to talk about all the new music for this week. Oh, wait, that was earlier. My bad. Yeah. Another solid NXT Premium Live event. Can't wait to talk more about it.
Yeah, and if you haven't checked out our podcast from earlier that went through all the music for our weekly music show, you can definitely check that out on the VOD. We have it here on Twitch, or you can check it out on YouTube, or you can download it wherever you download your podcast each and every week. Joining us for the first time on a live show is Rachel, joining us for this NXT Battleground event. Rachel, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm very excited to finally be here live with you guys.
And excited to talk about the winner of tonight's scorecard. It was me, but I'm not necessarily proud of that because I did not do all that great. Chris is proud of his showing despite being in last place. Did not get to finish the story. Chris joining us via the chat tonight, but it was a tough card. I think this is one of those cards that we talked about before the event happened, that there were a lot of justifiable winners that you could go through and make a case for almost everybody on the card to come out victorious. Mike, before we get into the specific matches, kind of your overall impressions about the event in total.
Overall, it was a solid event. It was fine. I think going into it, and especially on the scorecard, I found myself playing out multiple scenarios for each match in terms of who might win and not really being able to figure out what way they were going to go. So I think I can safely say, had they chosen the correct winner in all the matches, my scorecard would have been a lot better.
That's certainly one way of looking at it, for sure. Rachel, your overall thoughts?
I mean, NXT really can do no wrong. They did another fantastic Premium Live event. I think I maybe got one winner correct, maybe 2. I mean, like Mike said, it was just one of those cards that could have gone so many different directions.
Yeah, it was very wide open beforehand, which again kind of is a testament to the way NXT has been booked, that there are so many credible wrestlers on the brand. I will say one thing that is a big negative, and we're just going to start right out of the gate with it. I hope they never run another event at the UFC Apex. Yeah. It's a terrible venue. The crowd was not good. Crowd was too small. I thought the wrestlers were really out there killing themselves. I mean, you got Jordan Grace bleeding all over the place. And just for a crowd that just didn't seem very interested to be there. I don't care about the UFC, which is probably part of the reason why I don't really care about them running the Apex, because that's cool. You have all these former UFC and current UFC people. I don't care who any of those people are. And I thought for a brand that's been so red hot, it's a rare misstep. And I understand, I'm sure they didn't make that call. That's part of the TKO making that call for them. But I just thought a huge misstep for NXT to even run that building, because it was just terrible, to be honest.
Yeah, and I hope the powers that be kind of were paying attention to tonight and kind of the atmosphere and the crowd, and maybe rethinks holding it in that venue moving forward, or finding some way to bring in a much more wrestling receptive crowd. Because yeah, you're right. It felt like a crowd that was mostly indifferent to what was going on more often than not. It didn't have that same kind of party atmosphere that NXT's lately had.
Yeah, I've over the years have been very critical of the NXT crowd that runs at the Performance Center. I feel like over the last 6 months, they've kind of done a 180, and now they've been a fantastic crowd. And it's a crowd that probably isn't a whole lot bigger, if bigger at all, than the crowd they had tonight. But it makes the show so much fun because it just feels like they're a part of it. And I would have much rather seen the Premium Live event run at the Performance Center than run at the Apex. But I understand sometimes those decisions are way above your pay grade, so you kind of have to make the best of those situations. So really that's the only tremendously negative thing I have to say about the event. Overall, I thought the card was really good. I thought everybody went out and gave a great effort. I was a little surprised that the show was pretty devoid of any kind of surprises at all. Although, again, with that crowd, maybe they didn't deserve any surprises. So maybe we'll save those for a time because, again, they're going to be running Toronto in a month or so, and that's going to have a good crowd. So we'll see. Let's get to the matches, and we'll talk about the first. We'll start with the main event and work our way backward, and then we'll talk through 3, and then we'll take a break for our podcast listeners, and then we'll get to the last 3. We'll start with the NXT Championship at the end. It was Trick Williams in his first title defense against all-ego Ethan Page, who surprised everybody by showing up in NXT 2 weeks ago and was able to earn a title shot by getting his contract signed and getting it agreed to. I thought it was a really solid match. The Trick Williams ended up winning at 12-13 after Page was kind of distracted by the officials, it turned out, and then Williams hit him with a trick shot to end it. Rachel, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on Trick Williams and his first title defense?
He looked great. He looked solid. I think both guys went out there and looked really good. It was a shorter match, but overall, I mean, it did exactly what it needed to do. I kind of thought it'd be really cool if Ethan Page were to win, but he looked great in his debut, so I'm excited to see where he goes from there.
And you said shorter match. That's another thing you kind of want to point out, and I don't mean this as a negative, but all the matches were short tonight. The longest match was 14:25. That's the women's championship match that we'll talk about next, but everything else in the 12-minute range with the exception of the NXT Underground match, which went just over 10 minutes. All the matches felt like, for the most part, they got the time they needed, but it is kind of weird. You think of the old days of the black and gold pay-per-views with the 25, 30-minute main event matches that just went on and on. There wasn't any of that on this card. Now, it should be noted, and I'll get Mike's thoughts on this. This spot, at least we presume, for those of us who watch NXT TV weekly, this spot was supposed to be Noam Dar's. But Dar got hurt for real, as it turned out, in the supposedly being jumped by Ethan Page, which, for one, makes the booking make more sense, because Dar clearly was just being set up to be fed to Trick Williams as first title defense. But Ethan Page comes off the street, and I thought really gave a great showing and certainly made a good first impression in the NXT crowd.
Yeah, I agree. And I do wonder if the match times weren't something that they considered with the venue in mind, too, or maybe in front of a group of people that maybe aren't pro wrestling fans per se. You don't want to go out there and have a 25-minute match. I would have liked Page to win. I think that would have been the more interesting booking decision. The match was fine. I thought Page looked really good in the match. I don't think you're going to see Trick Williams in a lot of 20-plus minute matches just in general. I don't think that's really his style. He's character first, in-ring second, which is fine for what they're doing with him. But, the match did what it needed to do, and I think Page did a great job coming in kind of last minute and fulfilling his role. I'll be anxious to see where he goes next from here.
I mean, it's pretty clear. I think he is now going to be feuding with Metaphor. Obviously, he was jumped by Oro Mensah twice in the last week, and it's funny because now, maybe by accident, they've got the chance to kind of position Metaphor as the baby faces in all this because, one, they're so entertaining, but two, the ovation that Oro Mensah got Tuesday when he came out after the show to jump Ethan Page, it's almost like the crowd is ready to cheer for Metaphor, and this may be an opportunity to turn that whole group face and kind of see where they go from there. But very solid match. Again, Trick Williams did what he needed to do. As Chris said in the chat, I was kind of thinking maybe Page would win, even if it was by shenanigans, because of course they're going to be in Toronto in July, and I thought maybe they would run that match back in Toronto, give a chance for Page to win in his home country, but it didn't work out that way. But in the end, match did what it needed to do. I think, you mentioned the fact that you could have maybe booked a surprise. There really, again, weren't that many surprises, if any, on this card. The biggest surprise came in the match we're going to talk about now, and that's the NXT Women's Championship match, which I thought was, for me, the match of the night. Roxanne Perez against Jordynne Grace. Jordynne Grace getting her earring ripped out again. It looked like very early in the match, causing her ear to bleed. She nearly had her ear ripped off a couple weeks ago in a match, so joining the Mick Foley Club. But in the end, it was Perez countering Jordynne Grace and hitting a cutter of some sort, then hitting Pop Rocks to get the win in 14:25 to retain the NXT Women's Championship. You had Tatum Paxley come out and grab the TNA Knockouts Championship, which then Totally not Dana Brooke. It's Ash by Elegance coming in to basically try to rip it away from her. Jordan Grace knocks them both out, but then the distraction's enough for her to come back in and end up getting beat. Mike, we'll start with you. I thought this was really outstanding. The finish was kind of a little bit wonky, but you almost had to do something to protect Grace because they've made her look like $1 million. And honestly, she just came out of this looking just as strong as she did even with the loss.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you in terms of it being match of the night. Ever since Royal Rumble, they've done everything they could to make Grace look tremendous. And, I think it's only a matter of time before you see her around on a more full-time basis. I would also like to see Gresham join up at some point, too. Yeah, I would not have imagined that of all the other TNA people to make an appearance tonight, it would end up being Ash by Elegance or Dana Brooke being the one. Definitely caught me off guard. This match to me was the most wrestling-centric match of the entire night. You don't count the Underground match because it's more MMA styled, but this to me felt like almost like an NXT wrestling match. I was kind of shocked to see a muscle buster in the match. That's not something I expected to see in WWE ever again, to be honest. But I really enjoyed this, and I hope we see more of Jordan Grace and maybe some more crossover beyond that.
And obviously, Jonathan Gresham was there tonight, along with a couple of executives for TNA and Gail Kim, which is really interesting because Gail Kim, someone who really had a bad falling out with WWE with mainly involving Vince and some of the other people there. So to see her there, you hope there's maybe some bridges mended there because she's somebody who belongs in the WWE Hall of Fame as well, just for all of her accomplishments. But I would love to see some more crossover there, and I think we will. I think this was the first step, and I think it knocked it out of the park. Chris mentioned in the chat, this can only be good for TNA. I have to pose it to you, Rachel. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. 100%. I mean, it gets them the exposure that they don't necessarily, at least not to the level of WWE, that big exposure. And, I mean, they're looking good. I mean, it's not like they're bringing them in and, squashing them. They're bringing them in and looking strong. Like Jordan Grace looked strong.
And I'd argue it's good for NXT because I think the ratings bump we've seen the last couple of weeks has been directly because of the surprises that they've had. Having Ethan Page come in, obviously wasn't a TNA guy, but having somebody come in from outside, having Jordan Grace come in, I think that is going to actually help them both if they continue this on because it starts giving you the anything can happen. And I still contend, like, as long as you do that within the sense of reason, you can't go to car crash television. We, prove that doesn't work, but the occasional well-booked surprise makes your television show better because now I can't miss it. Now I don't want to be reading about it on Reddit. I want to see it in person and have that reaction. The other night or 2 weeks ago when Jordan Grace was the challenger, I think we'd come from tennis practice, so we were watching NXT on maybe like a 3 or 4 minute delay, and I didn't realize it at the time. So I'm flipping through X, and I see that it's Jordan Grace, and then I'm like, oh wait, that hasn't happened yet. That whole thing was a home run, I think, for both companies and for Jordan Grace. And you know what? How about for Roxanne Perez, someone who needed a title defense like that, and really comes out of this looking even more legitimate and even better as the NXT Women's Champion on the other side.
Well, I think one thing about the current regime in WWE that we didn't really see under Vince is that Triple H and Shawn Michaels seem to really like slow playing things. So you may have a card in a night like this where you're like, well, nothing all that exciting happened, but it doesn't feel like, well, this is it, we're done. It feels like, okay, they're just playing this. I mean, God, how long did the whole Bloodline story take to pan out? I think we're still good. It's just kind of seeing what happens next.
Yeah, and I think, you have to really plan it out slowly when you're working with a company that tapes their TV so far in advance, too, because it's not like you can just run a bunch of people to TNA's TV this week to, start the big surprise. You're going to have to work it out. And, of course, TNA has a premium live event, a pay-per-view event coming up Friday night against all odds. So that'll be something worth keeping an eye on because Jordan Grace is supposed to have an open challenge in that night. So is it going to be Tatum Paxley? Is it going to be Natalya? Is it going to be Roxanne Perez? Does she say, hey, you won your title, like, I'm going to put my title on the line to get my rematch with you? Like, because you can easily have Perez go and then do the job for her, and you basically end up even in the whole thing. So, but great stuff. I, talk about it a lot because honestly, I thought this was the best stuff. And again, kind of continues teasing what could be coming down the road. Last match we'll talk about before the break on the podcast version of this is the Men's North American Championship. Very solid triple threat match. It was about 12 minutes, but it was very much a sprint. You had the champion Obafemi defending his title over Joe Coffey and Wes Lee in 12 minutes and 3 seconds. I can't really recall anybody being booked as strong as Obafemi, but looking so justified in booking him that way. Just an absolute beast of a guy. It helps when he's in there with smaller guys, but Joe Coffey's not a small guy, and he threw him around like he was just nobody. And when Wes Lee did that flip out of the ring and Obafemi caught him, it looked like I was setting up a Hurricane Rana, and Femi just caught him and slammed him on the desk. Like, the dude, I don't know if he'll ever get to the NXT Championship because I'm not sure they're going to be able to keep him down that long. He just seems like somebody who's tailor-made for the main roster. Rachel, we'll go to you first. Your thoughts on Femi retaining once again?
Well, it's like Mike always said about Roman Reigns, like for our picks, we're going to pick him until he loses. And that's what Obafemi is, too. Like, I wanted to pick Wes Lee because I like Wes Lee, but I'm not dumb. And I think Obafemi was going to win. I had really no doubt, but I don't know who could beat him at this point. It was a great match. Everyone looked good, and I'm anxious to see what happens with Gallus now that they attacked Wes Lee backstage in the middle of the show, or like after the show.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a moment because that's certainly worth talking about. But I was certainly, we were talking about the slow playing with TNA. I mean, I was kind of hoping that maybe Moose's music would hit at the end of that match, and you bring Moose out to feud with Obafemi, because to me that's a money match that I want to see. But again, if you're going to do that, you've got plenty of time to set that up. I think that would be really awesome to see somewhere down the road. But again, kind of getting back to what Rachel mentioned, Wes Lee gets jumped by Gallus backstage. Wesley's got a couple friends that work in TNA that certainly could come to his aid. Of course, it could just be somebody in WWE, too, that comes to his aid because he's got a lot of friends there as well. But be curious to see if this is an opportunity to bring the Rascals in to do a six-man tag. And is that another slow play? Do you continue to tease it for a few weeks and build that for Heatwave coming up in July and do that match on the Premium Live event card? Because that'd be a pretty outstanding opener.
Yeah, there's really no reason to rush into anything at this point. To your point about Obafemi, anyone looking as dominant as him like this, it's really Gunther, but instead of pure wrestling ability, it's just raw power. It's the same kind of formula, though. And I think because of that, the concern when they made this a triple threat was, they're going to take the belt off him without him losing. And I think that's a mistake when you have someone like this. I think you have to have him get beaten eventually, and it has to mean something, and the person you choose has to be the right guy. I don't know whether it's Wes Lee or not. It's probably not Joe Coffey, despite being good to the last drop.
Oh, yeah, man.
But and I don't know. I mean, we'll see, but I think you're setting up a situation where you got to have someone really get over by beating him.
You do wonder if NXT should maybe borrow from TNA and do the thing where you have like the option to cash in your mid-card championship for a world title shot. I know that has happened many times with the X Division title in TNA.
Was it Option C or something like that?
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. I figured somebody could figure out what that was, but I think that's a stipulation you could put in that would make a ton of sense, because then you're not having him get pinned, you're having him give up that title, but he's getting something for it. He's not just dropping it and going to the main roster like so many of these guys have done in the past.
Yeah, I still feel burned out on the idea of someone just relinquishing titles. I feel like NXT had a curse with that for a while, whether it be by injury or just, I don't want this anymore. I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
I don't need that for any time soon.
Yeah, if you want us to take NXT seriously, you've got to do it the right way. And that's something that we'll be talking about over the days and weeks to come, is the debut on the CW is not far away. And you know that they are going to want to build some big storylines to go to the CW because they're going to want to do crazy ratings right out of the gate. And I think, drawing over a million plus is probably the goal at this point. I don't see why they can't do it if they set their cards up right to be able to do that. And Trick Williams Obafemi, that's a money match that you could certainly do early on in your TV just as a free TV match to draw a bunch of eyeballs in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is kind of off topic, but did the tweet that they referenced during the show, did that suggest that we're going to have Cody on NXT
Sounds
this
like
week?
it.
That sounded that way.
Because that really just feels like, we broke 800,000 at one point this past week in the ratings. Let's see if we can't maybe push it just a little higher.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, they smell blood in the water with
Yeah.
and of course, one of the two, either NHL or NBA finals has a game on either Tuesday. I think one of them has a game Tuesday, one of them has a game Wednesday next week. So I don't know if maybe there's some concern about lower ratings because of that, or they see an opportunity for Dynamite to draw like 700,000 up against good competition. So, hey, let's put Cody on, Tuesday and maybe we'll beat them in the ratings for a week. But yeah, I think that seems to be the case that he's going to be stopping by. So should be really interesting to see. If you're listening on the podcast version of this, we are going to step aside. When we come back, we're going to talk about the first three matches on the card. It's NXT Battleground live on Twitch or on your favorite podcast source. We will talk more about NXT Battleground when we come back on the other side of this timeout here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, NXT Battleground is the topic. We are here live on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check out our store while you're there. You can listen to all of our back podcasts all the way back to the first one. This is episode 67 of this podcast now as we continue rolling on towards the 100 podcast number, which is not that far away now. It's kind of crazy. We're 2/3 of the way there, but we are continuing to roll on. Earlier today, we did Music Weekly. Typically, we do that in the Sunday evening time slot. It'll be back in the Sunday evening time slot next week. But if you want to check out what we recommended, and there was some really good stuff this week, check it out on the VOD or wherever you get your podcasts. We recorded that earlier this afternoon. Coming up on Thursday, it's going to be another episode of our what was Anime Thursdays. We'll call it Nerdcast Thursdays. We're going to be talking anime, though, and specifically anime music. We're going to be recommending some more music for you to check out, and we'll do some anime headlines or some big stories in the headlines. We'll talk about that coming up on Thursday. Next Saturday, we are going to be back with you in the afternoon. It's going to be WWE Clash at the Castle, as we will be recapping that event. Once that wraps up, it'll probably be sometime around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday when that one wraps up. So join us for that. And then next Sunday, as I mentioned, we'll be back for another episode of Music Weekly. We are on to the music of May the 31st. So we are on to the final week, final day of May. Really excited to check out the music for that. So that is all of our upcoming schedules. A reminder that a lot of us are really starting to pick up our Twitch streaming as well on our personal channels. You can see in the chat all of our personal channels and where you can find them, because I think all of us, maybe Mike hasn't commented yet in the chat, but he can drop a comment in there so you can find his page as well. Also, make sure you check out Mike's YouTube page. Maybe you can even post a link to your YouTube page in the chat. Now Mike has commented.
Suppose I could.
You could. Because Mike does a lot of stuff. Obviously, if you're a fan of the Music Weekly, Mike posts a playlist each and every week that has all the music that we go through each and every week, so you can check that out. But he also goes through and ranks anime opens and ends too, or just opens?
So far, just opens.
We're
getting there.
He's got quite a few of those done already, so you can check those out on his YouTube page, which he will be dropping in the chat. And while he does that, I think I've covered all the business stuff we need to talk about. Let's move on to the third match on the card. It is the NXT Underground match between Shayna Baszler and Lola Vice. This is kind of the thing that the UFC Apex maybe was most prepared for. This is Underground match, but solid match. I don't know if it was as good as Baszler's match at Bloodsport. I thought it was good, but it was a little more overbooked. In the end, Lola Vice gets the win in 10:24. I was really kind of hoping this would be an opportunity to start elevating Baszler again, but I also understand you're putting over your NXT people. Vice certainly did a nice job. We'll start with Mike on this one. Again, it is nice to see that NXT has been able to take this underground concept, which was kind of a joke on Raw, and make it into something serious that can be a feud, blow-off type of match. Again, I think this was a very solid match. I think they got the winner wrong, but otherwise, I thought there was really nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, honestly, I prefer the fight pit. I kind of wish they would bring that back, but Underground certainly does what it needs to do, and it's kind of cool anytime you can showcase some of your competitors' more MMA background. I think Baszler and Weiss both work well for that. It was entertaining. It actually felt like they gave it more time than I would have thought they did. That was kind of strange. You're right, there was a lot of booking. I don't really know if the spectators needed to get beat up during the match. I didn't mind the match, but I really think you could have made Weiss look really good and still have Baszler win, because I think this is the kind of match that Shayna Baszler should never lose.
Yes.
Like, certain people have like their kind of signature match, and I think that's the case with Baszler and this Underground gimmick. I think that really should just be her thing, that no matter how good you do, she's going to beat you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And obviously they did their best to protect her. I mean, she ran her head into the steps before, the final sequence. The referee stopped it, and clearly she was still up and moving after that. So they did what they could to protect her with the result, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But again, that's nothing to take away from Lola Weiss, who I thought really did a nice job and has come on really well, and I think is doing a great job with this gimmick they've given her. It's, one of the few MMA people that they've brought in that seems to also be taking to the pro wrestling thing and kind of understands how that works as well. So it's really great to see. Rachel, your thoughts on the whole thing?
I definitely saw someone post on Twitter that they felt like this should have been the match that Shayna and Ronda had last year at SummerSlam. Like, that's what that match should have been. And I agree. This match, I think, was much better than that match. I really wish Shayna would have won as well. I think I miss seeing her be that beast that's just undefeated, like unbeatable. I think Lola looked great. It was a good match. I actually liked how long it was. I feel like I was more interested in this match than I was the Ronda and Shayna one from last year.
I would agree with that. I think it was definitely better than that one. And again, there wasn't really anything technically wrong with the match other than I would have liked to have seen Baszler win and then use that to kind of springboard back to the main roster, singles title scene. As Chris mentioned, she does have a tag title match coming up soon, but I kind of want to see her just wrecking people and being that fighter that she was in the Bloodsport event that we watched over WrestleMania weekend.
Yeah, which was really cool. But I think also her victory over Rousey should have been that moment. That's what should have propelled her back to singles dominance or relevance at the very least. I think that was a missed opportunity, and I just, when you have someone who is so different than everyone at the top of the card, like, I don't know why we're not finding a spot for her there.
And I also think sometimes it's hard to build really good heels for women. I think that's a difficult thing. They've done a pretty good job of it lately. Nia Jax has done a really nice job. I think Piper Niven has set herself up well for this title match coming up at Clash of the Castle. But Baszler is somebody who's like legitimately tough, and I think it's almost too easy to just have her wreck people for a few weeks, win the title, and be that heel that the babyface has to overcome. And I feel like they're just missing a very easy booking opportunity there.
I think there are kind of three archetypes for what you want to see or what you can believe as a good heel women's wrestler. And I think you have your Nia Jax and Piper Nivens, obviously. You have someone like a Ripley who's just physically strong and jacked out of her mind. And then you have Baszler, who is a legit fighter. I think that's the other piece as far as workable heels that you need, doing what they need to do.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all turns out. Again, kudos to Lola Weiss. She did her job well here.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to...
She's a star.
I would have to think she is going to be first in line based on the fact she's a heel for the NXT Women's North American Championship. I feel like that's probably where she goes from here. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll get to that match in a moment. Let's talk about the Tag Team Championship match. It was the OC, Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, against Nathan Frazier and Axiom. and thought the OC might win this one, but in the end it was Fraser and Axiom getting the win in 12-10. It was very much a sprint. I thought the Good Brothers wrestled a really great match. I thought it was they brought their working boots, as they say, and they made these guys look really good. And in the end, the underdog champions, baby faces, overcome and get the victory. Rachel, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on this championship match?
Oh, I thought it was a great match. They said that Axiom and Nathan Frazier never slow down, and that is pretty much accurate. I feel like they were constantly moving, constantly jumping off of things. I thought Gallows and Anderson looked fantastic. I love seeing them in a serious match where they actually look like they can hang with these guys, and I'd like to see them do that more often. Hopefully they can start getting more opportunities back on the main roster, but I thought it was a fantastic match. I love seeing Axiom and Frazier together.
I think Chris made a good point, because that was the same reason I chose the OC, is I thought maybe having them with championships kind of boosting this new extra heel AJ Styles would be a good look. I feel like WWE still doesn't know how to book their tag division on the men's side and the main roster. We broke the tag team titles up. That was supposed to make everything better, but in the end, I kind of feel like it's still very stagnant, and you've got teams like the OC that should be on my TV every week, either building their way up to the title or wrestling for the title. In the end, it's for as much 5 hours of TV a week, I still don't think there's enough emphasis there. But otherwise, those thoughts aside, I thought this was really good.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a matter of they kind of have the thing that they're doing with the SmackDown tag titles right now with A-Town Down Under and DIY, and they don't want to. They don't think there's really a spot for the OC to get interjected into that. But yeah, this match tonight is the kind of match that you used to never see on Raw or SmackDown for tag teams. Like when Anderson and Gallows were up there regularly, those kind of matches just never happened. So you didn't really get a chance to see them and the fact that they actually can work with smaller people and not kind of get left in the dust. So I think their performance was great, and I would love to see them and AJ still kind of find their way back to the top and be relevant in what you have to assume is the last few years of their runs.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully, I understand that they're probably holding off the DIY tag team title match till they get to Cleveland, but that's still a couple months away.
Slow playing again.
Yeah. I just, I understand that to some degree, but at the same time, like, would it hurt the heels to have a couple of title defenses along the way, like instead of these singles matches alternating? That feels very Vince booking.
It really does. You're right.
It's, every once in a while that style of booking creeps its way back into the television, and to me that is a Vince booking trope where like one tag team guy against the other tag team guy, and then we'll flip them the next week and they'll split wins, and it's just not a huge fan of that. Give me tag team wrestling if you're gonna have a tag team titles, or get rid of the tag team titles and don't have tag team wrestling. But this NXT's tag division has been very strong, and this was a very strong match that certainly did it well, and lots of options for these guys. Maybe we see OTM work their way back into the tag team title picture. Those guys certainly have been on TV more, and I think you would think with Scripps leaving, maybe they're going to continue to maybe push those guys. It'll be interesting to see who's up next for the tag team.
You got Anafi and Blade.
You do. Still looking for something. And maybe a heel turn for those guys might be in the offing.
I can see that. And you got the family still. The rest of No Quarter Catch crew. I mean, they definitely have some people around there.
There are tag teams. And then we have that new tag team, those two guys that debuted.
Yeah.
I can't think of their names. I don't know their names, but they're baby faces, and they're happy to be there, and they've done really well. I was going to say Hank and Tank, but I think one of those two guys is injured right now, so I can't remember Tank or Tank. But
hopefully it's not Hank, because that dude was one of the security guards.
That's right.
It's really important that he's healthy.
That's right. But lots of tag teams, and that's not even counting tag teams they might bring in from TNA, because I know saw Ace Austin and Chris Bay talking about wanting to cross that line.
That would be fantastic, actually.
Love to see them against those two, especially. That would be insane. But good tag team title match, the second match on the card. The opening match was the ladder match for the inaugural Women's North American Championship. Very good match. This was one of those matches that you really could make a legitimate case for all 6 of the women in the match. And in the end, I don't know if anybody picked her in our group, but it was Kalani Jordan getting the win in 12:25 to win the NXT North American Women's Championship. Again, I thought this was there was a stretch there early in the year where I thought we were a little burned out on ladder matches. We were having a lot of them across wrestling, and I feel like because of that, they all kind of started to run together. It's been a while, so I felt like this was in a fresh spot. I also felt like there were some things I saw in this ladder match that I've not seen in other ladder matches, which made it feel extra fresh. And then, of course, Sol Ruca with two Soul Snatchers, which I don't know how long this move's going to last until she's done all of the different variations, or you start running into situations where it becomes a little too hard to set up, but it certainly is impressive. Mike, your overall thoughts on the match?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought they didn't really have any of the ungodly, insane spots, which I'm glad, honestly, because I feel like Michin probably would have been the one on the receiving end of it, and we don't need that. Yeah, a little surprised with Kalani Jordan. Not that I don't think they're high on her, because I know they are, but I really thought with her and Sol Ruca being injured for the time that they were, that was going to kind of hold back their push a little longer. I thought Michin would have been a great choice to win. Let me think.
The Lash Legend, who's obviously been very well pushed. I picked her, actually.
Yeah, she's... Metaphor has been tremendous for her. There's no doubt about it. I thought Fallon Henley with her, new heel persona was going to actually make that step.
Jada Parker's been someone they've been very high on.
They've been really high on Jada Parker. There's no doubt about that. So that wouldn't have surprised me. But, Kalani Jordan's good. I can't really argue with it. Wasn't quite on the same level as the women's title match, but was a solid ladder match.
Certainly a very solid opener, and good to put that one on first before maybe the other two women's matches, because it might have been a little overshadowed. One, because the MMA style match was so different, and two, because the women's title match was so good.
It did kind of give you an indication of what the crowd was going to be like early on, because I felt like they were really flat for a lot of this match. It was like, guys, this is a ladder match.
Yeah.
And you mentioned being burnt out on them, and I think to some degree I was too, but since it was the inaugural North American title match, it seemed fitting that they would decide to make it a ladder match like with the men's North American title originally.
And of course, probably good to go ahead and get this in because you're going to have Money in the Bank coming up soon.
Yeah.
So you've got two more ladder matches to come fairly soon for WWE. But I thought this was a great way to start the show. Rachel, your thoughts?
I mean, I'm happy for Kalani Jordan. I think she did a great job. I actually was going for Mia Yim because I feel like she really I feel like she needs something other than just being part of the OC. But I mean, everyone looked great in the match. Ava talked about in the lead up to the match how they have the best women's division in wrestling, and it's hard to argue against that when you see how amazing these women just in this match are. Sol Ruca blows my mind with how athletic she is. She's definitely got a bright future. But it was a great match.
Yeah, just really solid, and the women got the ton of spotlight, not just today with however many women they had on the card, and 10 women, 9 of them under contract, 1 of them not. And then you had all the women that were on NXT TV this past week, which drew a monster rating. So again, the proof is that if you have good women's wrestling, people will tune in for it. I think if you take it seriously, your audience will take it seriously. I think when you we have to have a women's match here, well, then your audience is going to treat it that way as well. Yeah. And I think there is a certain company that runs that, shall remain nameless, that sometimes treats women's wrestling that way. That it's like, we gotta have a women's match here at this time of the show, and because of that, the audience is out there yelling that they want the match to go home and they don't want it to stick around. So, great stuff, and NXT just continues to roll along. And again, my only criticism of the event is that it was very much paint by numbers. It was almost very safe booking across the board, and again, because of the venue, because of the lackluster crowd, I'm almost willing to give it a pass because the effort was great across the board, and they are going to run, Scotiabank Arena coming up in July for Heat Wave. So if you really want to do something crazy and have a crazy match, that's really the spot to do it. But overall, very good show, very solid show, nothing wrong with it. But I think
I think we could have had Poppy as host. I think that would have been a step in the right direction.
Maybe they're saving her for Toronto as well.
Can only hope so.
I really hope they bring her back in some form or fashion. Rachel, your final thoughts on NXT Battleground?
I mean, another solid night for NXT, and definitely leaves you wanting to watch on Tuesday to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah, really good stuff coming up for NXT. And again, Singapore Kane match coming up on Tuesday between Dante Chen and Lexis King.
Authentic Singapore Kane.
Yes.
Yes,
Except
absolutely.
no substitute.
That's exactly right. Mike, your final thoughts?
It was solid. Yeah, I think maybe you go into it thinking there might be a little more shenanigans and craziness, and we didn't see it here. But all in all, it was a good show.
NXT's just been very solid, and I feel like, they took the very solid, safe route tonight, and I can't really fault them for that. Again, with big shows coming up.
Big show?
Yes, maybe. With the possibility of continuing to want to have these surprises on your TV show every week instead of doing it at this PLE. Like I said, I can kind of give them a pass for maybe being a little safe. But overall, nothing was bad on the card. Everything was very solid. And that NXT Women's Championship match, if you're going to catch one match from the card, if you didn't get a chance to watch it, that's the one you need to check out. Hopefully it's not the last we've seen of Jordan Grace, even during her time in TNA. Hopefully WWE can find a way to get her involved a little more often. That is going to wrap things up for our live edition. That's not the right song, so we'll try that one instead. Eventually we'll get those things labeled on our board, but really good stuff tonight from NXT. First 2 stream day for us here on the Nerdcast Empire, so it's been a long day of streaming, but a lot of good stuff as well, so really appreciate you joining us. And again, you can check out our Music Weekly. It dropped earlier today. You can watch the VOD, or you can catch it on your podcasting networks, which of course is where this will be in just a little bit. Reminder, we've got a lot of shows coming up. We'll be back Thursday for Anime Talk. We'll be back on Saturday for Clash at the Castle recap. We'll be back on Sunday for our next Music Weekly. So make sure you stay here at Nerdcast, on the Nerdcast Empire at twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire. That's going to wrap things up for this Sunday evening. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. We'll be back with you coming up on Thursday night for another edition of the Nerdcast Empire. For the entire crew on a late Sunday evening, almost Monday morning, I am Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.